All right, NBA Finals talk time. Game one is in the books, with the exception of it wasn't a faux comeback. The Mavericks came back in the third quarter of game one, but then they were pretty much shellacked throughout the entire game, basically. Leading into game two, want to get into that with you and your thoughts on what you've already seen, your takeaways, and some adjustments that you could see moving forward. I did want to start, however, with Kristaps Porzingis just coming back and having the half quarter of his life when he checks in at the 7-12 mark of the first quarter.
That's
We
right.
didn't
He
know,
came off the bench. I forgot.
right. And he did things that we know he could shoot over players who were smaller than him. Go figure. He can kind of protect the basket. But were you as like shocked? I was awestruck at how like he was dominant. He just 38 days out, comes back. You're in the NBA finals and he just absolutely killed it. What did you make of his performance in game one and just the value of, I guess, what he's doing to the Celtics as you look ahead to the rest of the series?
Yeah, he looked incredibly spry. Like there was one of two ways that this could go with him coming off of like he hadn't played basketball in over a month because of the calf strain. He could have been super rusty, and or still like who knows what lingering stuff might be there, or he was going to look incredibly rested and just like ready to go. And it was definitely the latter. Like his mismatch attacking and the decisiveness of it. Like he was really quick to, it's not like he was like attacking off the catch, but he was like, I'm going to immediately size up my defender and immediately like force them to react to me. And that really, like, he wasn't letting Dallas off the hook. So, and like you said, the rim protection, he had how many of his blocks were just in that first quarter stint too. He had that transition block on Josh Green, and I was like, Josh, you're gonna get blocked here. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And then he tries to dunk it, and Kristaps is really just kind of like backpedaling, jogging back, getting ready to get in position for that block. But then he got it. He met it like right at the right at the apex, like right before
Yeah,
the
I
dunk
mean, it's
too.
like that's a oh, I am over 7 feet tall
Yeah,
block. That was that type of block.
exactly. And he altered many more shots than that on all of the Mavericks. They had a really tough time finishing in the paint. I really thought that this series was going to look quite a bit closer to the OKC series because I knew that Kristaps was going to provide that rim protection as well, even though Boston sort of switched up the matchups in a way that was a little bit different than OKC did for most of that series. But yeah, his he came in from the weak side, and it wasn't just like weak side blocks. It was a lot of like weak side altering shots and just like mucking everything up around the rim that I think was even more impactful than the scoring. Although the scoring was really big because I actually think that if Dallas wants to have any chance in this series, it has to be defensively.
I mean, the other story of that game was just Boston's defense in general. When you look at Dallas's, I mean, the lobs, of course, those are taken away, but their inability to generate the types of looks that they've become accustomed to. They were leading the playoffs in corner 3-point frequency. They took 3 total corner 3-point attempts in game one. Boston did a great job of coaxing more above the break looks. And there was no one person where it was super high volume, but it was like, yeah, we'll let Derek Jones Jr. or PJ Washington or Jaden Hardy take those looks. They threw, aside from like actual blitzing, they did everything that you could imagine against Luka Doncic, where it was, yeah, sometimes like, or they switched. They had guys stay on him. They also like there were points and Luka did, go after, I think it was Al Horford and he hits a 3 over him, but like they were willing, just not in high volume, to have their bigs on him at points. What did you just make though of Boston's overall defensive approach? Like I think a lot of people came away from that game, or at least some of the stuff I read and listened to was, well, Dallas is going to hit some of their better shots. Kyrie Irving will hit more of their shots. Kyrie Irving will play better. I think there is some of that to an extent, but I came away from that, and maybe this is me living in the moment too much of game one, but I'm like, how the fuck is Dallas supposed to solve any of this?
I think that I didn't expect Dallas to struggle this much offensively against Boston. Game one was truly like the best defensive performance I've seen from Boston the entire playoffs. And it was because of how sharp they were on everything. They mix up the matchups, right? Everyone's talking about how they put Jason Tatum on Kristaps to sort of, or on Lively, and put Kristaps on PJ to sort of neutralize the Luka Lively pick and roll. Did Dallas have any lob dunks in this game? No, right?
I think they had one attempt. I don't know, and maybe it was a miss if I'm
Yeah,
mistaken.
yeah. I think there was like a was that a pass, or was that a floater and then Lively like cleaned up the offensive
Well, that's a
rebound?
testament that you talked about Kristaps like detouring shots, and just like you saw it with Kyrie and Luka a couple times, just the way that they kind of bailed out on when they were going downhill.
Yeah. No, I think that the story of this game can really be told in comparing the impact of Gafford and Lively to Al Horford and Kristaps. Because Kristaps, as impactful as he was, the fact that Al Horford was able to hold up enough on switches onto Luca meant that Dallas didn't have to change their game plan on at any point in the game, whether Kristaps was on the floor or not. Because, like I said, they had Kristaps on PJ, Jason on Lively, and they were like, we're just going to switch everything now. So the lack of like overall 3-point attempts is because they were making it difficult for Luka to get to to get to the step back from his left, I believe, which is like the way that he tends to like to go. And Al, I think, did a good job on the perimeter with that for the most part, although I think Luka did hit one over him, like you said.
He's like, I mentioned this a bunch of times, but like Al Horford's weird where I would trust him more if he has to cover someone who's gonna try and torch him laterally or going downhill. But like if you can just generate separation with your step
Yeah,
back, he just doesn't feel as equipped to
right.
guard those guys anymore.
I agree. Like, I don't want him on anybody shifty,
Yeah.
right? But I actually thought he did like well enough on Kyrie. My thing with Kyrie is that he does need to play better, but it's not just about making shots, although he did miss a lot of open shots in this game. I just thought his process was terrible, especially in those non-Luca minutes. Like, he does need to carry those units, and it's not like he's playing with 4 starters. But like watching them play, like, do they even know like how to run offense or what they want to do on a given possession? No. I watched Sam Hauser like deny Kyrie the ball for an entire possession that ended in like
Sam
a
Hauser
brick
guarding
on
Luka
the.
at points too, unafraid.
I
Sam
know.
Hauser.
And then Sam forced that Kyrie miss off
Oh,
the
the corner,
backboard from the
yeah, the
corner.
bomb
I
corner
was
three,
like,
yeah.
oh my gosh, what is happening right now? But the process on those possession is what I was most uh not concerned with, because I've seen Dallas not solve this before, but have better process even against good defenses. And so I do think that they are going to play better in game 2, but I don't even think Boston played particularly well in game 1, except again defensively. But I think that Dallas didn't really pressure them too much with how they were approaching offense. It wasn't just like, oh, Luka needs to make more shots to force them to change their plan. There are other ways that that Dallas can sort of try to adjust or try to punish what Boston is doing defensively that they just didn't go to in this first game. So yeah, I think the level of discombobulation from the by the Dallas Mavericks was something I did not expect in this series. However, the discombobulation of their defense against the way that Boston likes to play offense, it was much expected. And so kudos on Boston for just like taking advantage of literally every single mistake or breakdown by the Mavericks. One of the things I noticed when my watching back on the film of this game was just like, I was originally concerned with like, oh, I hate this scheme, like Dallas is allowing too many threes, etc. But going back and watching it, it's like, man, 75% of these possessions were just like bad communication, mistimed help, um soft switching instead of like do a real switch, like you're guarding this guy now, don't just like kind of drop back or like let him blow by you immediately. And it was Luca, but it was Kyrie, it was everybody that needs to play on a string a lot better if they're going to continue the way that they're guarding. I don't know if Kid is going to hit the okay, we're making a massive adjustment button in game 2, or if he's going to hit the you guys need to play better and execute this thing better before I can even think about trying to change up what we're doing.
Do you think there's anything too, though, when you're looking at they struggle at points with ball containment too, and then you're talking about the
Mhm.
help defense and particularly around the basket. When they haven't gone up against a true 5-out team in these playoffs, and then when you
Yep.
look at where some of these, I mean, specifically Kristaps Porzingis can sling it from, you're so stretched out that it's going to be tough if it's an actual big who has to close out on Porzingis, or if it's going to be like one of your other players, like they're not going to be able to they either have to shoot those gaps or going to be further away on the closeouts, or if they're tasked with helping because actions are happening behind them, that's more ground that they're going to have to cover going south at that point. And I don't know. And I don't know what the defensive adjustment is like. Do you see, and you mentioned the bad process, but do you see anything they could try? Is it even lineup wise? I know you had tweeted about they should try playing Derek Lively and Kleba more together. They've barely played together this season, part because of injuries. And Derek Lively was in foul trouble. But
He got 5 fouls in the 3rd quarter.
honestly
It was
impressive
a
though.
very rookie game, like the most rookie game that I've seen from Lively the entire playoffs.
Which is
It's
because he is a rookie, and we kind of forget that because he's just been so good, basically wire to wire, and specifically during the playoffs. But is there anything you just look at that Jason Kidd maybe should try or move to? Is this gonna? I think a lot of people have latched onto the idea that this might need to be a Maxi Kleba series, and in terms of stretching out Boston's defense even more, and then maybe opening up lane. Like I think if Dallas is going to win this series, honestly, we can talk about they need someone like a PJ Washington to maybe force Boston into rotation a little bit more, like do things off the dribble rather than just, or be more of a screen setter. But it really, to me, is just going to come down to like Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving need to figure out a way how to really prop up the offense one-on-one. So Maxi Kleba to me would help there, just the extra spacing he creates. You of course do lose the lob threat in that unless you're playing with him with a Lively, but he's also not like shooting threes in high volume
he's
since he came
not.
back. And so
Yeah.
I'm genuinely asking you, do you see anything that like Dallas should try? Because you mentioned maybe not trying anything drastically different, and perhaps a better process and decision making will help them. I left that game kind of at a loss for what I think Dallas can do on the offensive end.
Right. No, I completely agree. And it's because I didn't really expect Dallas to struggle this much offensively, given what the Celtics were doing. Because I really just thought that it would end up in a situation where Boston was going to switch a lot. I was expecting that because that's what they like to do. They're going to try out their base scheme, see if it works out. And it did, for the most part. But I also think that Luka and Kyrie can improve their process when they have those switches. I also think the bigs could play better. I don't think that as great of a rebounder that Jason Tatum is, and I talked about this in our series preview, how important it is that Jason Tatum is as high a level of a rebounder as he is, because he effectively allows the Celtics to play small ball because he is a power forward, but he doesn't really play like a power forward, but he does enough power forward things at a really high level that the bigs don't have as much of a burden on this team. As great as Kristaps is and as good as Al Horford is, the fact of having to like constantly set screens, constantly rebound, just et cetera, things that 4s and 5s do, puts a lot of pressure on these guys who are a little bit older. And so Jason Tatum allows them to play this way because he's so good at those things. But Derek Lively should not be consistently getting bullied out of the way by Jason Tatum for both offensive and defensive rebounds. Daniel Gafford, I think he had a couple of offensive rebounds in this game, but he was getting absolutely bullied, and really it was fouling, but that wasn't being called, by Drew Holiday. But like, look, it's not about like, oh, Drew is a really good post defender. I'm like, Daniel Gafford, you are an undersized center, but you are still like 6'9" or whatever, and incredibly athletic. When you're on the floor, you have the best vertical of anybody on the floor. You cannot let Drew Holiday push you from underneath the basket into the stanchion so that you cannot grab rebounds. That has to be one of the ways the Dallas punishes the switching, both on the offensive end. Defensively, they need to continue to. I think their defensive rebounding was mostly fine in this game, although Boston got a lot. It was a lot of like
There was
long
that
rebounds off
possession
threes, and
in the first quarter where Boston got like 4
it was like
offensive
3. Yeah, it
rebounds.
was like half. I'm like, wait, half of these were on one possession. I think Dallas did a decent job most of the rest of the time, even though Boston had them in rotation a lot. And the offensive rebounds that Boston got were in really key moments too. So when you said it wasn't a fake comeback, I'm like, well, it kind of was. They ran out of gas and then they couldn't keep executing. And so I think it was like 2 offensive rebounds in a row that started to push the Boston lead back up again. And then they got their offensive process back on track after just sort of playing Boston ball for for like a 5-minute stretch while the Mavs went on like a 29-9 run or whatever it was. But I agree with you. Like, I did not expect them to struggle this much offensively. So a lot of the adjustments that I predicted Dallas would have to make had more to do with the defensive end, because I thought their defense would be really just completely ineffectual against the way that Dallas likes to play, or that Boston likes to play, because Dallas likes to pack the paint. But when you look at the actual numbers, like Dallas had a really good rating, defensive rating in the half court, like 98. Was worse than what their offensive rating was overall in the game, like 97, because Boston's defense was even better. But they were getting absolutely crushed in transition, like 188 offensive rating for the Celtics in transition. And so I actually do think that the offense is the bigger problem. And then defensively, there are a lot of execution things that Dallas needs to clean up. Kristaps is a problem. You talked about my double big suggestion. It's something that they did in the Clippers series for reasons that had nothing to do with a Kristaps-like player on the floor. But it was really about allowing Lively or Gafford to stay at the rim whenever like one of them was on the floor, or Kleba whenever they switch somebody onto the big to try to neutralize that pick and roll game between Harden and Zubac. Now, it's not like Boston's not a high volume pick and roll team, but they run a lot of like pick and pops with Kristaps, and he's involved in off ball screening options, etc. If you end up in a situation where you can neutralize one of their more efficient actions that say involves Tatum and Kristaps, because you can switch Kleba in that situation and then keep Lively on whoever is in the dunker spot. I know Boston does a lot of things to kind of keep players moving, so that you basically have to be in rotation, because the guy who maybe wants to stay in the dunker spot, in this case, let's say it's Lively, has to also watch out for the fact that, oh, they're swapping places here. This guy's in the dunker spot now, and now that shooter is like darting out to the corner, darting out to the wing on a particular action. And that's where like the communication and just execution aspect comes in. But I think in terms of not letting Kristaps get those easier switches could really help. In the second half, they were doing a lot more of trying to keep Lively on Kristaps to try to make sure that those switches weren't happening. But then Boston was able to create threes, because whoever was guarding the ball handler had to either chase, and the guys were getting downhill and collapsing the defense, etc., or often when it was Luka, he was playing a lot further back and trying to play in kind of a drop. But the thing with Boston is that all these guys have like a super green light. Like, they are ready to shoot. One of the problems that OKC had was they have all these like really smart decision makers, but they are a little bit too hesitant to take the good shot when they think they can get a better shot by driving into traffic and trying to, I don't know, further collapse the defense. And so I don't think they're like, they missed shots, but I think they also were not taking a lot of shots that were available because of the way that Dallas was defending them. And I compare them to Boston, because both of them try to play 5 out, but the Thunder's 5 out is a lot of like constantly drive and kick, and everybody wants to keep driving and kicking. But with Boston, they're like, oh, first open 3-point opportunity, we're gonna take this, make or miss. Let's go.
I've seen though a lot of, and there was like, I can't remember the specific time breakdown, but it was like from the second quarter until the mark of when the starters were pulled in the fourth quarter, Dallas only lost the game by 3. And so it's like, all right, well, for like that's super cherry picked. But in the third quarter, they do go on that run. And when you go back and watch it, there was like Dallas's defense did seem on point, and it seems like they had more of a game plan on how to defend the 3-point line or how to get guys off the 3-point line.
Yeah.
You had kind of alluded to this. I can't remember if you were talking about the third quarter specifically. The way they were defending, because they were still just in constant rotation and flux, they just ran out of gas. Is there anything though that they were doing during that mini stretch. Um,
They didn't change too much about their scheme, except, like I said, just trying to keep Lively like pressed up on Kristaps so that Boston wasn't getting those easy points, and then the Celtics just kind of, they forced some other switches and took guys in ISO, but they weren't. There was like a little bit of better ball containment, but they were kind of getting open threes off of not paint touches. So it was just better containment, and then not letting Kristaps get the easy stuff, even from like the mid range on those like face ups on like a mismatch on a small. But I think they could protect the rim better too, because what ended up happening after like Missoula eventually calls a timeout because he's like, we can't let this happen. Um, Eventually calls a timeout after like a 29-9 run, whatever. Was the Celtics were like, oh no, we have to touch the paint on every possession and then we can generate better threes. Okay, good. And then they did that. They got their threes. They got their shots at the rim, etc. I think when Lively and Gafford can figure out a way to spend more time closer to the rim, the rest of the Dallas defenders aren't as concerned with collapsing, or at least they shouldn't be. So they're able to stay home on shooters a little bit better. So I do think that if you can get somebody else that you trust to be on Kristaps, like Kleba, just because of his size, and who can also switch onto all of the Boston ball handlers in all of those off-ball actions that they like to run for Kristaps, then you can have like sort of best of both worlds defensively. But it's all experimental because we haven't actually seen too much of it. They ran it for like a really, really small stint in that third quarter. And I don't think it's what propelled their run, but I thought it was an interesting look that they should, just try out a little bit more.
Is there anything in particular you'll be watching to see from because in theory they really shouldn't change much, if anything, but looking at Boston, is there anything you're just trying to see if they do better or that they might change heading into game 2 and beyond?
I think that they'll probably blitz Luka a little bit more.
Okay.
In part because throughout the game 1, they did try a couple of different looks, especially depending on if the lineup included both Luka and Kyrie or just one of those guys. I think they're just gonna, and when I say a little bit more, like they didn't really blitz at all, maybe on like 2 possessions or something, entirety of game 1. I think they'll just throw it in a little bit more to give them a different look and just keep Dallas off balance. Besides that, I thought defensively, they don't have too much to solve because the Mavs haven't really done anything on offense so far to make them rethink what they're doing. So there's no real reason to adjust there. I think that Peyton Pritchard can be a little bit better than he was in game 1. It wasn't just shooting. Like, he just looked very uncomfortable on both ends of the floor. He did like hold up decently on a couple of possessions on Luka or whatever, but just watching him play, he usually plays with a lot more confidence, like knows exactly what he's going to do. There was just a lot of hesitation in this game, and he wasn't making shots, and he was just like, oh, what do I do? I'm stuck. Because like there was good ball containment in this possession. Like, what do we do? Like, just kind of get the ball moving a little bit faster and that kind of thing. But other than that, I thought everyone played like pretty well. Jaylen Brown was awesome in this game, and guys made shots. Like, so it's really on Dallas now to force the Celtics to have to play better.
I am wondering, I thought he had a good overall game, and you already mentioned his rebounding. If there's something that can be done or needs to be done to maybe make things a little bit easier on Jason Tatum. I think the value is in the attention he draws. I thought he did make some good passes. I thought Dallas did a good job at points of getting the ball out of his hands. I'm wondering if the Celtics, I know they want to have the ball in his hands, but if you're going to do that, can you maybe set some ball screens even higher for him? Or can you do things off the ball? You maybe set more pin downs for him to come off of. They won without him having just this monster offensive performance. I'm just like kind of picking nits here because I don't
Yeah,
even, I
no,
don't
I
know what.
agree with that. Like, he's better. It's easier for him when he's able to operate off the ball and attack downhill, say off the catch. He often just goes for the 3 because
That's the other
if
thing too.
he
Is like if
gets
Luka's on
those.
you, like you don't got to take the step back. Like you could maybe try and like,
Yeah. So that's something that Dallas sort of is probably going to try to go to more, try to goading Boston into more isolations. But I don't know, like, they were fine with Tatum having this, like, mid-game because he didn't have, like, a super high usage in it, and everybody else was efficient. He was creating for them. He did have 6 turnovers in the game, so that's, like, the plus when you like, for Dallas, they're like, "Oh, we collapsed the defense a lot, and we forced a lot of turnovers," like, so that's, a plus to packing the paint, but he also made a lot of great reads,
I guess we
and
still lost by almost 20, so it's like,
bunch of his yeah, and a bunch of his kickouts, either led to an open three or just led to like a really solid drive and kick sequence that ended in a good shot for somebody. So Tatum could play better, but I thought he played really well. Like especially when you look at the burden that he has guarding Lively and or Gafford on any given possession and having to make sure that they don't get beat up on the offensive rebounds. I don't know. I just think he had a really great game. So
they don't need him to have a better one because
yeah.
but something I'll be watching. Is there anything else we haven't talked about that you think needs to be discussed?
Yeah, I think we've talked a lot about the Celtics offense. Like NBA Twitter has had a lot of thoughts about the Celtics offense as a whole, and oh, they're so reliant on threes, so they end up with a low floor because if they have a bad shooting night, so on and so forth. But watching this game in particular, it was very clear to me that the like 25th percentile outcome for the Celtics is so high. It's not their floor because again, bad shooting night could be bad. But their 25th percentile outcome is very, very good because teams are so afraid of their three-point shot that you have to defend them a certain way. Dallas has had so much success packing the paint and guarding the rim and making teams have bad offensive nights because of that. But with Boston, even on a mid shooting night, like they weren't like amazing last night. It was still like 40% from three or something as a team. But even
Which,
on
by
nights
the
where say
way,
they
is
shoot,
like they shot well from 3 overall, but
yeah,
people were
it
talking about
wasn't
it like it was a barrage of threes, and like,
right,
no, that was like that was a regular
right,
Thursday for Boston, basically.
right. It was a barrage in the first half, and part of that's because they had so many attempts, like 27 attempts. I don't care what the scheme is or the level of execution is from Dallas. You cannot allow any team to have 27 attempts from three in the first half unless it's the Orlando Magic. Um, but, uh, the teams are so afraid of that three-point shot that it opens up so much else in the paint. So even though I don't really trust the Celtics to say make semi-contested twos at a high enough rate to beat like a team that is running offense competently, like that's not what the Mavericks did in game 1, by the way. But they'll get a lot of decent looks from two just because of how willing they are to take these transition threes and things that they get because the other team is like messing up on their offense. Right. So that's just like philosophically something that I was thinking about with respect to the Celtics offense watching this game.
Yeah, they ended up shooting. They were 15 of 15 in the restricted area in this game, which is just like that's not necessarily an
Not
absurd.
something that most teams do against the Mavericks or any
Right.
teams did in the playoffs. Right.
And it's just I'm wondering, I will be interesting to see if there are any schematic or personnel or whatever tactical adjustments from the Mavericks because it just feels like, and I had mentioned this during the game, is that there's a chance we might look back on this Celtics team as an inevitability that we, not necessarily me and you, but definitely me, collectively tried to paint as something less because I'm just watching this
Oh,
Dallas
I'm
defense.
definitely in that too.
Right. I'm just watching this Dallas defense, which has been so good since the trade deadline. And I'm not smart enough to say that I should have the fixes, but the fact that I just can't really point to anything and say Boston's offense or the way that their personnel won't stretch them beyond the point of functioning at a high level is just absolutely wild. And so like Boston is just I don't know. They're actually literally hashtag built different. Like, and so they will have the games. You mentioned the low floor. There will be variance when you're taking threes, but as you mentioned, it opens up all this other stuff. And by the way, we have not seen them really in the postseason without like Kristaps Porzingis being healthy and moving the way that he was. And it was funny afterwards. By the way, he's like, I didn't even think I was 100% yet. I was like, what the hell does 100% look like when you're moving with some of the stuff that you
Who
did? So
knows?
I don't want to say it's hopeless for the Mavs because I picked against them. I think in every series so far except the first round. So like I had them beating the Clippers and then I just had them losing to everybody else, the Thunder, the Timberwolves, and of course the Celtics. But I'm going to be fascinated to see if there's anything they can do because I do feel like this series, after watching game one, maybe it's an overreaction, has the potential to kind of go off the rails for Dallas, just
Yeah,
based off some of the stuff we saw.
for sure. I had this as Boston in 6, but I thought, 5's possible, but I don't trust this Celtics team. But maybe they're just like super locked in. You could see that from their defense. They were like totally on a string with all of their communication, etc., throughout this entire game, which you need to be because, like I said, there are other ways that Dallas can punish you for the way that you're sort of messing with the matchups. But yeah, I think 5 is possible. I still just don't see Dallas getting swept. Um, I'll be curious to see how they adjust, particularly offensively, which I was not expecting to have that big of a question for the Dallas offense, but that is the bigger concern for me now than the defense after seeing game 1.
I'm sorry, I already can't remember if we like talked about this, but like, do you just see, we did this a little bit, but like, do you need to spam more of Derek Jones Jr. or PJ Washington being used as the screener just to try and get the de facto big maybe involved in the
So
action? Or is Boston going to, pre-switch that and it's not even going to matter?
So Boston's scheme is pretty similar to the scheme that they used in the March 1st game that they had against the Mavericks. And so I actually thought that that would be something that Dallas would have to keep going to. That was one of my predictions for the series. But after watching game 1, I actually think they should try to keep finding ways to use Lively and Gafford, because that vertical spacing threat is such an important part uh of maximizing Luka as an offensive as an offensive threat,
Mhm.
as an offensive weapon. Um and I think that their offense is just most potent, not just when you have that vertical spacing threat, but when you have somebody who has real roll gravity, because these other guys aren't going to collapse the defense. And Derek Jones Jr. in particular has been making really bad decisions with the ball. I advocated for using him more as a roller in the Wolves series. But his short roll decision making and his like just roller decision making from the back half of that series through now has been less than ideal. So I do think that both Lively and Gafford just need to be more involved, because I think you're letting Boston off the hook if
Okay.
you do the thing that is a little bit more obvious, because those guys are just easier to guard. Yeah.
I'm I'm kind of curious if this becomes, not that it won't be like that he can't necessarily play, but we kind of already saw it. What did he log, 14 minutes and change in game 1? Is this just, even looking at defensively, can this just not be a Daniel Gafford series? Because we saw him run into some issues against OKC too, and like Boston's built in a
Yeah.
similar way, but with
That's a
better
good point.
decision makers on the ball, or better attackers on the ball.
No, that's a really good point. And I actually thought that Gafford was pretty bad through the first part of the Wolves series as well. So I was just like, okay, they have one good center now, and they just need to survive the Gafford minutes. But as that series went on, he became a lot better. He was just playing smarter, making good decisions on the short roll, whereas he'd kind of just been like, I don't know, Euro stepping into 3 guys before. And then by the end of that series, they were like winning his minutes handily and losing Lively's. And maybe part of that's just like rookie stuff that I didn't even notice as that series went on. Um, I think Kid has, to a way that I appreciate, been very consistent with his rotations and trying to figure out ways to get the guys that are on the floor playing better and playing with, schemes that counter the other team. So I don't think that Gafford is going to be removed from the starting lineup, is the short answer to that. But I do think that they need to figure out a way to get him next to somebody bigger, whether that's Kleba or, like, he just needs another front court partner, and he needs to play better. Because, like I said, can't be bullied by Drew Holiday for the rest of the series, where it will be short, because they need their bigs to play well against this Boston team, because it's the only position that they really have an advantage outside of Luka.